felt like I had to accept. I had realized that these guys were very dangerous. I did not want to jeopardize our friendliness with them, at least not until we got to a safer location with people around. Not too much further down the highway, I glanced in my rearview mirror only to notice a state trooper coming up fast with his flashers and takedown lights operating. I slowed, moved to the side of the highway, and stopped. The marked vehicle pulled over and stopped about 15 or 20 feet behind me. I realized that something unusual was happening, but I did not know what. The officer did not get out of his vehicle, but rather, using his exterior microphone, stated, "Driver, step out of your vehicle. Move to the rear of your vehicle." I stepped out of the vehicle, and then he spoke again, now towards me, and stopped at the halfway point. The officer then approached me at the halfway point. We were now far enough away that my passengers could not overhear what was being said. The officer then told me that when I get to Dateland, a town, that I was to drop off my passengers, and asked if I understood it. I told him, yes sir, I do. I did understand, and I wouldn't comply. "We are watching," the officer said, and then asked almost as an afterthought, "By the way, have you been drinking?" Yes sir, I replied, feeling at this point honesty to be the best policy. "Are you aware that in this state an open container law, and that your vehicle could be impounded?" he asked, continuing his lofty interrogation. Yes sir, but it was kind of hard to turn them down if you know what I mean," I replied. "Just drop them off at Dateland," the officer responded. I now realized that I did not know where I was or what was really going on, or even how I was going to get these guys out of my vehicle when I got to this Dateland place. All of this was beyond me. I returned to my vehicle and continued on our way. Not knowing the area, I somehow must have passed Dateland without even realizing it. This time, when I looked in the rearview mirror, I was in for a rude shock, as I saw that at least 10 or 12 police cruisers all lit up and no sirens were keeping pace with my vehicle. There was no attempt on their part to pass or to pull me over, and I was thinking to myself, what the hell have I gotten myself into? "Pull in here," said the hitchhiker who was in the cab with me, just as we were approaching the rest area. "No, don't go in. Just park on the side of the road near the entrance," he ordered. Suspecting that the police would now make their move, I was very worried. Looking back, I noticed all the cruisers were also pulled over, still in line and still all up behind, at least 20 feet to the rear. All the cruisers had the red and blue lights on, flashing away. It was quite a sight. Two of the hitchhikers had walked into the rest area and had now returned, climbing into the cab. "Let's go," the leader commanded. As I pulled out and began to pick up speed, two cruisers screamed by, sharply braking, turning at about a 45-degree angle across both lanes in front of my truck. I put my head down and hit my brakes, praying that I would not hit a police vehicle. As soon as my pickup had come to a full stop, I looked up to see that all the officers were out of their patrol cars. They had their handguns drawn and staunch to kill, pointed at my vehicle. I quickly placed my hands on the steering wheel and in my heart prayed that we would not be shot. At that point, I heard the officer who had detained me earlier on his PA system giving me the same set of instructions. "I thought I told you to drop your passengers off in Dateland," the sheriff said as I approached him. My response of, "I'm sorry, I don't even know where Dateland is," seemed to aggravate the officer. At this point, I was becoming agitated more than a little concerned, because I could not figure out what was going on or how I should be responding. Then, just to add a little more confusion, the officer changed tactics. Instead of telling me or ordering me, he asked me if I wanted these guys out of my truck or not. His phraseology now placed the responsibility on me, and I knew I would be in danger by the hitchhikers if they actually heard me give consent. "If you want them out, then fine, go ahead," I said to the officer. The officers then hoisted their sidearms, moved the two blocking vehicles from the highway. From the initial pursuit and detainment to this period of time, I had seen no other vehicles traveling in either directions. Concluding that the police had sealed off the highway in both directions, the police then identified all bags of gear belonging to the hitchhikers and searched them, finding something in one bag. The owner was arrested and the rest of the gear was left strewn in a ditch along the highway. The other two unwanted gentlemen were left on the side of the highway as well. An interesting note to add to the above is that the police left the beer and cigarettes belonging to the hitchhikers in my truck. They would not let us leave them with the hitchhikers. "Dump the beer when you get to the next town. Understand?" The officer who had initiated all of this ordered. "I understand," I said, even though I really didn't. As this state had an open container law, why was the beer not confiscated as it normally would be? Could it have been to conceal paperwork or to show no paper trail? Could this mean that they were protecting themselves and their job? Were they perhaps not to have contact with me? If so, who gave them their orders or instructions? The hitchhikers who were arrested were not actually detained until after his bag along with the others had been searched. I believe that the police were just hoping to find something in order to make an arrest, perhaps to compensate for the spent man-hours, as mine and Alan's bags and possessions were not searched before or after. Who was under surveillance, the hitchhikers or us? The pattern of behavior concerning the police would seem to follow my history, both past, present, and future, showing that there seems to be some sort of government protection assigned to myself. The past, possibly in the adoption and consequential cover-up pertaining to my American history. The rest of this book will show in a lot of its stories a similar pattern of protection provided by some organization throughout my entire life. And this brings us back to the question, who or what am I? That such extreme methods of surveillance and protection are needed. To what end is all of this necessary? Chapter 7, page 25, Surveillance and Harassment. Upon my return to Canada in April, I would not say that the reception was all that friendly. An incident involving Canada's own Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, helped me to realize that something indeed unusual was occurring and that I'd been under surveillance the entire time I'd been out of the country, making me wonder as to how long this surveillance had actually been going on and why. Had it been going on my entire life? Only 2 days after returning home to my parents' home in North Vancouver, I was pulled over on Donovan Street by an RCMP cruiser with flashing lights. It was supposedly a routine check for proof of insurance. The officer approached me and asked me for my insurance papers. Upon producing them, he shrugged. He did not need the insurance papers in order to know if the vehicle was insured. On all British Columbia vehicles at that time, the Department of Motor Vehicles and the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia were linked. A decal of insurance was issued and placed on all vehicles at the rear plate. Then this officer spoke, sending chills up my spine, and to this day, this very day, and the rest of my life, I will never forget his exact words. Mr. Holgate, how was your trip to California? How does one respond to something like that? Fine, thanks. Thank you for asking. May I go now? I responded. Sure you can, he replied. Oh yeah, remember, we're keeping an eye on you, he added. How many times am I going to hear that phrase in my life? Who was watching me and why? I was only 17 years old and had never been in any real trouble. I'd been raised and grown up in an upper-class neighborhood with a good address. Why then would the lowly traffic officer know or care that I'd been to the United States? I lived close to the border, and thousands of Canadians travel to the United States every day, and no one cares. As well, another question is that if I was under some kind of surveillance, then why bother to tell me? Simply put, someone wanted me to know. Again, however, the question is why and who? Why might be answered as easily as intimidation, maybe trying to get me to stop looking for my roots. Foolish them. For I hadn't even started at that point and wouldn't really try for another few years. No one could have possibly known how strong my will or my memory. To answer the question as to whom is much harder. Maybe because my grandparents, or either of my biological parents, or even my mom's legal husband, the United States government classified my